All right. Welcome, Rocxer. Happy to have you here, dude. And happy that you're hopping on here to tell people about what your experience has been like. So, can you give people a brief overview of your background and your history with porn? So, what brought you originally to work with me?
Well, first of all, it's happy to be here. I'm 26-year-old from the Dominican Republic, and I've been struggling with porn for about 14, 15 years. And there was just a point where all the change that I was trying to make for myself was not working and have the right outline to follow in order to actually create change. And it took me to a point where I said enough is enough, and I had to learn about what's actually going on behind the scenes to understand better and create the change that I want in my life. And today I am proud to say that I've been sober for 6 months, which is compared to previous time where I was actually sober for about 8 months. But I didn't have the same understanding that I got from Nate's course that had in-depth information of how the mind works, how our emotions work. So 5 months now, in comparison to 8 months before, is completely night and day. And I'm glad that I joined the program because I've learned many things that I probably wouldn't have learned on my own or talking to other people in my personal, like family members. And it's just been a different experience being in a group that holds you accountable and is there to teach you the right things in order to progress in recovery.
Yeah, 5 months is no joke. For
Man,
a lot of people, that seems totally unrealistic and out of reach. How long had you struggled with porn prior to this? And what was your average ability? What was your average length of sobriety or abstinence that you might have been able to get prior?
so during the peak of my addiction, I would say it was 15 years in active addiction. And in the peak of that addiction, I'd say that the longest that I went in sobriety was about a month tops. And that was just completely white knuckling, like you mentioned in the course, which totally doesn't help because you fall much harder. Like the punch that you get back from that opponent, from the war within, it's harder than ever. And I would say 1 month, and then 2 years ago I managed to go 8 months, but it's because I completely went under the radar. I didn't have a phone. I sold everything, and I just took a camera and moved back home where I was born, the Dominican Republic. And those 8 months of sobriety, it was progress, but I didn't have the understanding of how addiction worked. So in comparison to 5 months now, with it's different. It's like there's a different level of understanding, a different level of acceptance in those 5 months.
Yeah, one of the things that people find in recovery from this applies to pornography or anything is that getting sober is not the same thing as recovering. And that in alcoholism, they say that there's a type of person who's able to stop drinking, but they don't recover, and they're called a dry drunk. This is somebody whose addiction basically has just gone dormant, but
Mhm.
given the right circumstances and conditions, it just wakes right back up. And as we talk about in the program, right, like negative sobriety, trying to deprive ourselves doesn't work. We can abstain, but until the inner work of recovery is done, we don't ultimately heal.
Right, right.
Yeah. Could you describe a little bit about what your active addiction cost you? Like what frustrations and pains or other negative consequences did you experience in your active addiction?
It cost me a lot, and for a while, for a long time, I was very avoidant to a lot of things that interest me. My relationship with my family deteriorated because I just wanted to be alone. I didn't feel like they understood me, and in fact, I didn't understand myself, and so I was pushing them away. It also cost me a lot of possible, intimate relationship with girls that actually were actually interested in me, and since I had all this shame within me and guilt, I pushed them away. Like I couldn't find a way to be myself in front of these girls. And so I felt lonely for a very long time. And now I can see the difference between being alone and loneliness, which is two completely different things. I am very okay being alone, but now I know that loneliness in the long run is something that I don't want to experience anymore. So I am dedicating a lot of time to building relationships, finding a community with people who share the same interests as me.
Yeah, that last point you made is huge. A lot of people, out of a place of inner lack or scarcity or shame or insecurity, will turn to relationships to try to make themselves feel better. It's an attempt to fill what we feel is lacking inside of ourselves instead of authentically connecting and having a real relationship with people.
Right.
And this process of beginning to build a sense of internal security and, like you put it, being able to feel comfortable alone or comfortable within ourselves as ourselves actually becomes the platform off of which we can jump into and begin to experience really amazing relationships with people. And it's night and day from before, right? Where we don't have that internal agenda of like, please fix me,
Yeah,
please, please make me better. And all of a sudden it truly does change everything.
it does. It truly does. Because if I am not, let's say you come into a relationship, which the relationship that we discussed in the program, I wasn't completely. I had more freedom because I was practicing this, you know, practicing certain strategies, certain skills to, reprogram the mind, and I felt more confident. But it was all superficial. It wasn't the deep work. And so when I showed up in this relationship, the shadows, it just took over all that, all those superficial things, and the real me emerged, which was this needy person, this person wanting to take from the other individual, and not knowing how to engage and be present in that relationship in all this, in all its parts. So that kind of hit me in the face and really influenced me to change and learn to actually, be present in those relationships for me in the future, which I'm interested in.
Yeah, my God. That's something that Carl Jung once said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life and we'll call it fate. A lot of us, we talk about this in depth in the program too, that we're a lot of people, this applies obviously to addicts, but not just to addicts, that we're often split in two. There's the acceptable, lovable part of us that maybe feels a little bit more secure, the adult part of us that we tend to navigate most of our life with. But as soon as we get into a relationship, that
Yeah.
shadow part, that
Oh,
second part, it comes to the surface every time. And
right.
that happens. I think one of the really important perspective shifts to have, which it sounds like you've had, is that it's not that we need to make that part of us go away. It's actually that we need to learn how to be present with it as it comes up in a relationship in order to process what's going on and navigate those difficulties because we experience it. I guarantee you that the girl or whoever you're in a relationship with, they're experiencing it in their own way. And
Right.
learning how to accept that and realize that's part of being human is for that part of me to show up and no longer need to be afraid of it because you have the tools and resources to be present with it, to communicate about it, and to not lose yourself in the process and stay connected to that sense of internal worth and not giving our power away and all that kind of stuff. This could turn into a whole other video. So,
It does. I bet. Yeah. Very
uh,
interesting stuff, man. It's the change is remarkable because it's like a nuance. It's something that you remember, but you didn't quite have it, but you remember like it's part of you. So it feels so
mhm.
so good to actually, for my experience at work, it's Cherry Creek, so there's a lot of females in the creek. And so I've I've managed to be aware whenever that lustful, those lustful thoughts come up. I've managed to bring my awareness to it and shift that. And so I'm more confident speaking to women, like engaging in conversation, because I accept that part of me. And I shifted to where I don't want anything, I don't want to take anything from this female. I just want to have an experience in this moment. She's going to part ways, and whatever, whatever happens, happens. I'm not expecting anything. And so that nuance, that change has fueled me in the past few weeks, man.
It changes a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about, that arriving at that place of outcome independence
Yeah.
where we can show up as ourselves securely, confidently, and not need any interaction to turn out in any particular way. We
Right.
lose the hidden agenda, and
Yeah.
that completely changes the way we carry ourselves. What a weight off of your shoulders, when you don't need an interaction of any kind to turn out a particular way in order to feel okay about yourself. Oof.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man. It's a freedom. It's freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on now, kind of back to the central theme of this talk. Could you describe what tactics you tried on your own to quit? And why do you feel like those weren't successful?
Right, right. In the past, I would engage in the acting out behavior for let's say a week straight, and then it would come like a Sunday, and I'm like, holy shit, it hurts at this point, and I'm just gonna stop, and I would just try to go the longest distance that I could by just by doing my by will, trying to completely say no to it whenever it arises, and it would be so uncomfortable, and I would just push through it. And now I know that it's not it's not the right strategy, because there's no it like sneaks in. It has a way to sabotage that barrier. Willpower, it's I don't know how to explain it. It's just it sabotages you. It's like it hits you with a spark of amnesia, and boom, you're just back into this behavior.
Yeah, yeah, you get stuck in the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde cycle where post relapse, right, with the post nut clarity, as the kids say, we're very aware of what we want out of our lives, and we're very
Right,
aware of what pornography may be costing us.
right,
And we can feel this very sincere, real, true desire to stop the behavior, stop harming ourselves, stop harming our relationships, and choose a better life. And we can mean that from the depths of our soul. And then the insanity of suffering from an addiction is that we get days, weeks, or as I often say, let's be real, sometimes hours later, and all of a sudden it's a switch flips in our
mhm,
mind. And
yeah,
we have this perverse twist where all of a sudden Dr. Jekyll turns into Mr. Hyde, and every fiber of our being somehow now seems to think that the absolute best thing that we can do is the exact thing that we just had this very emotional,
right,
deep reflective decision to not do anymore.
right, right,
It's insane, That's a universal experience of people suffering from addictions of any kind. And definitely what you said, that a huge thing that we try to get through in this program is abandoning the idea that willpower is the solution. And in fact, like you were saying, willpower is often what keeps people trapped in this cycle, because that isolation, obsessive self-reliance based willpower strategy is exactly what's keeping people disconnected from the solution that actually works. So
right,
it's like, the addiction circuit that loops infinitely, the
right,
switch that closes it is willpower.
yeah,
It's when I think that the solution is going to come from me trying harder. That's what closes the switch and makes the circuit run. So
yeah,
having that insight of like, it's not a willpower problem.
yeah.
It opens the switch, and finally the circuit can stop running.
And yeah, I want to add to that, in believing that you push everybody away because you think that you're the sole person that could do this with the willpower. But in reality, you need other people. And willpower then becomes the secondary thing that you could use in certain parts to, grow your self-esteem. But the top level thing is connection, like you mentioned a lot in the program, having other people's believing in you. Hey, I understand what you're going through. I want you to push through, and I know you will recover.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of ways that this can be described. One of the ways that I was thinking about this recently and that I wrote about a little bit was one of the beautiful things about recovery and finding out that connection is where healing comes from is that we start to realize that the immune system for our minds and for our spirits, if you will, it doesn't lie inside of us. The immune system for our brain and for healing these kinds of things like addiction, it actually lies in the connections around us, like the tribe, the community, the people to whom we belong. There, like that system of connections is what has the immune system, right, to
Right.
help treat the addiction in the individual. And realizing that it's like, oh, like the thing that has the power to fix me, I can connect to it, but I just can't find it in myself alone. It's such a radical shift away from how most people approach this problem. So,
Yeah, I've been trying to, because it's hard to find a way to tell people, or how to sum it up to tell people, hey, this is what I'm going through. The reason I'm telling you this is because I hold you very dear, and any support would help, and that's, I think, has been the biggest obstacle in my journey. It's like actually opening up to certain people that I, hold dear.
yeah. Yeah. The opening up to others is can be a double-edged sword sometimes.
Mhm.
When it's happening in the context of somebody we trust, who we know will be supportive of what we're going through, that can be an extremely positive thing. A lot of people get into a trap though of trying to find the totality of the connection that they need to recover in their friend group among people who
Mhm.
don't understand the problem. And so
Right.
what they get in return oftentimes is a lot of shame back. This is I have absolutely no resentment or anything towards the friend who told this to me at one point. But back in college when I was struggling and I had just relapsed, I remember I told a friend about it. And his response to me basically was, this is what happens when you keep denying your biological urges, implying in some way that if I could just start having sex with a real girl, this problem would go away. And his intentions meant well. But as you know, and as
Yeah,
I know very well, getting into a healthy sexual relationship is in fact impossible while you're addicted to porn, A, and B, once you start having sex, it doesn't solve the problem.
it
How many
doesn't.
guys are struggling with porn who are in committed relationships, who are having sex with a girl that
Right.
they're in a relationship with, right? It's not the solution. So
Mhm.
making sure that a huge part of the base of your connection is to people who understand the nature of the problem, in my
Right.
experience, is incredibly important, which is
Right.
why joining a recovery based community is vital.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
makes sense. That makes sense. And then, yeah, I assume that if sharing with those people who actually understand, then those relationships and with the people who probably mean well but don't understand will naturally improve as, I start to heal and recover more.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, part of what I've seen happen in myself and then in others in recovery is that as we progress and develop really good relationship skills in terms of being able to communicate our emotions, being able to talk to other people about how they feel, having intimacy skills, the capacity for deeper emotional connection, that we no longer need to bring the porn addiction thing up, perhaps. And instead, we can actually just be real and authentic with those people in the moment. And that real connection, obviously sharing our struggles as that may become relevant in a conversation, but just talking about how we feel. This is, like being able to sit down with somebody and ask them, like, how are you doing? What's going on in your life, and actually mean it. And then, having this back and forth of like emotional exchange, like, hey,
Yeah.
this is how I'm feeling in my life. This is what's going on. And I feel happy, excited, afraid, sad, angry about this thing. And then the emotional exchange of relationship back and forth, that actually hits the direct core of what creates the porn addiction in the first place, which is that desire for loving connection and intimacy. So,
Yeah, I feel
yeah,
this is definitely a muscle because speaking from my experience, it has been considerably substantially hard to communicate how I feel without trying to fix it. How you stated in the questions, in the checking questions, it is that is one of the hardest things for me. You know, obviously it's getting easier as I go, but that is hard. Whenever you don't have like when you don't learn that from the beginning as a child, you have to learn it at this stage of the game. It's wild.
yeah, man, this is a gold mine of conversation in
Yeah,
terms of topics we could, rabbit holes we could dive down. But absolutely, for most men, this is a stereotypically male problem. They don't they don't actually know how to feel their feelings. They intellectualize them and then they fix them in some way. There's a stereotypical male tendency to fix, change, be completely solution oriented every time something is brought up. And that's not a tool that we want to dispense with entirely, because obviously sometimes going into solution mode is very important. But a huge root of a lot of emotional distress for people is that they are constantly rejecting their own feelings. They're constantly abandoning that part of them that just needs to be felt. It just needs to be experienced. It doesn't need to be fixed. So part of another way to say this actually is that the actual solution, if you really want it to be problem solving and solution focused mode, it's realizing that the real solution that this feeling is looking for is non-judgmental acceptance. That's what it wants. It doesn't want to be fixed. It wants the solution, the fix is non-judgmental acceptance. And opening that part of our brain up to realize that so much healing happens simply in the act of being seen, known, loved, and non-judgmentally accepted. And it's
experience.
work. It's work to get there.
Yeah, man. I'm doing it. I'll do it, man. Whatever it takes.
Yeah, man. Yeah. That's a huge part of what the program is for.
Yeah.
So yeah, we keep getting off on these rabbit holes, which are great, or these tangents, which are great. But can you talk about how things changed for you once you joined the program? What were some of your early challenges and what helped you overcome them?
A lot of the challenges in the beginning was digesting the material because there's so much knowledge and it's easy to get into this just absorbing the knowledge and not implementing and feeling overwhelmed, because obviously now I have to add these actionable steps into my agenda. And obviously, in active addiction, your mind, the brain is completely, changed, and all these things seem unsurmountable and like this giant elephant that you have to eat. And the biggest step is realizing that you have to do it one day at a time, slowly, because obviously there's resistance. But after I accepted that, it was easier to sprinkle things here and there, find time, create time for things to flow, and not become fixated on the amount of things, but actually finding one thing to implement and do it, which eliminates a lot of the first barrier of resistance. Is just finding one thing and committing to doing it.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, as we talked about earlier, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And a huge perspective shift, which I know we talked about, but I'll mention this for people who are listening to this, right? Is I love the video game analogy. And a lot of times when people get into any project of radical transformation, whether it's healing from addiction, it's healing trauma, it's improving dating and relationship skills, it's whatever they're trying to do, they're they at some point will become conscious of how much has to change. right? Like how much dead wood the forest of their mind has accumulated that will need to burn off, and the amount of change that has to take place. And it is overwhelming initially, but when we take the video game analogy, I think it can take the gap between where we are and where we want to be or where we're called to be, and it can turn it into something that we're actually excited about. That we see the gap between where we are and where we want to be, and it inspires us rather than terrifying us. And the video game thing, right, is if you the best video games that any of us have ever played, or even the best movies or best books that we've ever read, the main character has to go through a serious story of development, right? There's an arc of character development for every main character. And in a video game, I love it because it's about building skills. And if you play something, as we mentioned, like Dark Souls, right, where you it's a really hard game,
It
but it's
is.
incredibly fun. But
Yeah.
you start out and you don't have very many skills that make you don't have enough skills to really be effective in the world that you find yourself in. And how true is that for most of us, especially early in recovery? Part of what we're confronting is I don't have the skills to solve this problem.
Yeah.
The second part of that, though, is the fun and the journey of the game is facing new enemies, facing the challenges, putting time and effort into building out this one particular skill set, and then facing bosses, right? And then losing to them like 20 times. And
Right.
over the course of facing these challenges, we further build and refine the skill set. And then, we enter the game, we're not going to be able to defeat a level 75 whatever
Yeah.
boss. But then as we continue to develop the skills, then all of a sudden we're like a level 80. And that thing that used to just absolutely kick our ass, we can handle no problem. But
Right.
it was from this attitude of I understand that this is a system, it's a process. And my only responsibility, like you said, is to take it one day at a time, one bite at a time, and trust that if I continue to do that, it's going to get me where I want to go.
Right. Yeah, that has been one of my biggest takeaways is realizing all this dead wood, like you mentioned in the forest. It's making the life of dealing with that so much worth it once you go through it. And that has been so profound for me. All that dead wood has to go.
All the dead wood's got to
It's
burn.
yeah, that predicament is worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And after joining the program, what were some of the big insights that helped you? Did you have any early moments, or they could be current moments, or any big shifts in how you approach solving the problem of this addiction other than what you've shared already?
One of the biggest, a lot of the insights that in the past, before joining the program, I didn't have within me were the different pitfalls that one can fall while trying to recover. For instance, when you would gain some days of recovery, naturally your brain is healing, but then again, something pops up in your life in another area, and it can cut you off. It can get you off guard because you're not aware of that. This addiction is, managed. It has infestated all of these other areas, and if you're not aware, you could easily just fall back into the trap of trying to fulfill this natural instinct with this unnatural, desire.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The A huge amount of the motivation for me behind starting this program and producing the content and whatever else that I'm doing largely has to do with spreading the awareness and the experience of, like you said, the pitfalls and the obstacles that people can face as they try to embark on this path. Something that I've experienced is that recovery, in a way, is very simple. The problem is that the path is very narrow, and the opportunities to get pulled off of that path are abundant. And most people, they at times will set off in the right direction, and then they reliably get pulled off into the same pitfalls over and over and over and over again. So
Yeah.
bringing those to awareness of how do you actually stop self-sabotaging, what is lying underneath the root of these self-sabotaging behaviors, how can you navigate these situations that everybody who's had an addiction, who's recovered before you, has also encountered and has found effective ways to deal with? How can you do that too?
Yeah, definitely identifying those things that veer you off the path in the narrow path. It's a big thing that I've learned, and by far one of the most important things, because it is the way to keep you, to understand that the path is narrow and there will be things that will challenge you.
Yeah, absolutely. How would you say things have improved since getting into the program?
In the past, I would say that I was very, very prone to rejecting a lot of opportunities in my life. And after joining the program, I found that I am able to be more present and give more responsibility to the challenges that I face in my life. So I am able to feel more confident taking on new projects, new challenges, instead of hiding away and isolating. I accept that this is the path that I must take. For that reason, I I try to face them head on. And so the confidence in myself, and the in my ability, and knowing that I could, face the challenges in my life, has really been one of the changes that I've gotten from the program.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. What would you say to somebody who is currently struggling with porn and who might be thinking about joining the program?
I would say that obviously we could do a lot of on our own, but there's only so much that we could do without people who understand and that have gone through the same thing that we're dealing with. We're not going to have those insights, that perspective. We're not going to see those blind spots. And so our path to recovery is going to be considerably harder. It'll take longer, and the fact is that it could probably never go away if we try to do it on. So I encourage anyone who's struggling with any type of addiction to seek help, to seek a group of people who understand what you're going through, and that will encourage you to become your best self.
Amen.
Right.
That's the
That's
message,
right,
man.
man.
Yeah.
So far, man, this program it's top notch, man. The quality in it, it's magnificent.
Awesome, dude. Well, this actually turned into much longer than just 15 minutes, but that's okay. It was a good conversation. Thanks for hopping on the call, man. This is huge. I think everything that you shared is really going to help people out there. And thank you for doing this, and thank you for joining the program and for participating in the ways that you have. You've obviously you're here in part to get help, but like the way that you participated and stayed engaged and shared yourself and your thoughts and everything in the program has been extremely helpful to me, and I know it's been really helpful to everybody else in the program. So, thanks for showing up, man.
Glad to be here, man. Thank you for having me. And I wish to share more of my experience in the future. Hopefully, it helps people. Anybody who can learn from my experience, I feel grateful for that.